Love is one of the most profound experiences we can share as human beings. Yet, isn't it ironic how sometimes the very people who love us deeply seem to pull away? It feels counterintuitive. Shouldn't love bring us closer, not create space? But here's the truth: love isn't simple. It's messy, vulnerable, and often misunderstood. Love is often portrayed in simple terms. Two people meet, they fall in love, they stay in love, and everything in between is just a smooth ride. This idea is not only misleading, it's a disservice to the beautiful complexity of what love truly is. The reality is that love isn't linear. It's not a straight line from point A to point B. Instead, love is a winding path full of unexpected turns, pauses, steps forward, and sometimes even steps backward. When we think about love as a straightforward progression moving from attraction to attachment to commitment, we fail to acknowledge the human experience that comes with love: vulnerability, fear, imperfection, and growth. Love challenges us, pushes us, and often it leaves us questioning ourselves. It requires us to show up, sometimes when we feel inadequate, and it asks us to be authentic, even when doing so feels like we might get hurt. The one who loves you deeply may, at times, appear distant or detached, not because their love for you has disappeared, but because they are grappling with their own internal conflicts. There might be fears, insecurities, or past wounds that resurface, and in an attempt to shield themselves, they create space between you. This distance is not a reflection of their love fading, rather, it's an expression of their complexity, a manifestation of the messiness that comes with being human. If love were linear, then there would be no room for growth. Love doesn't just move forward, it moves in circles, loops, and even spirals. It is through these complexities that we deepen our understanding of ourselves and each other. The beauty of love lies in its capacity to evolve, to adapt, and to withstand the challenges that arise. When someone who loves you a lot seems to ignore you, it's essential to consider the broader context of their actions. Perhaps they are retreating not because they want to withdraw from you, but because they need to retreat within themselves to understand their emotions. They are not leaving you, they are simply working through their own complexities. Their silence, their distance might be an invitation to be patient, compassionate, and to acknowledge that love is not about constant proximity or perfection. It's about the willingness to honor each other's journeys, even when they take unexpected turns. Love asks us to be vulnerable, and vulnerability isn't easy. It requires us to face discomfort, to risk rejection, and to challenge the societal norms of what love is supposed to look like. The complexity of love lies in the fact that it doesn't always fit into the boxes we create for it. It's not a series of checklists first. This happens, then that happens. No, love is much more nuanced. It is felt in the moments of stillness and silence, in the times when words fail, and in the quiet spaces where emotions run deep and unspoken. So when you find yourself questioning the love of someone who seems distant or preoccupied, take a step back and remember love is complex. It's layered with all of the hopes, fears, dreams, and insecurities that we all carry. It doesn't always look how we expect it to, and it certainly doesn't always unfold the way we want it to. But this is where we find the true depth of connection, not in the predictability of love, but in its willingness to embrace the chaos and unpredictability of being human together. In the end, love isn't about finding a perfect formula or following a set pattern. It's about showing up through the highs and lows, the clarity and the confusion, the moments of closeness and the periods of distance. Love doesn't move in a straight line. It ebbs and flows. It stretches and contracts. But at its core, it is always there, waiting to be embraced in its messy, beautiful complexity. As we reflect on love's complexities. It's important to understand that when someone who loves you deeply seems distant, it isn't always a rejection. We're quick to interpret space as a wall, as if the emotional distance is something to be feared, something that signifies the end. But in reality, space can be a bridge, not an obstacle. When love feels distant, it's tempting to assume that the other person is pulling away, perhaps even running from the relationship or from you. However, true love understands the importance of personal boundaries and the need for emotional space to recharge, reflect, or heal. The moments of distance allow for reflection, for personal growth, and sometimes even for better understanding of one another's needs. It's an opportunity for both people to recalibrate, to come back to the relationship with fresh eyes and hearts, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. Space doesn't have to create division. When understood correctly, it's an invitation to honor each other's individuality and autonomy within the context of love. It's a testament to the strength of a relationship when two people can trust that their love will endure through periods of distance. This trust isn't fragile, it's resilient. It's built on the understanding that love can thrive, even when it's not always in constant view. So as we close, let us remember that space in its truest form is a space for growth. It's not a rejection, nor a wall. It's an opportunity to reflect, to heal, and to understand that love isn't just about being close in proximity, it's about showing up for each other, even when there's a little distance between us. And in the end, love, in all its complexity, will bring us back together stronger, wiser, and more connected than before. Thank you. Communication is the lifeblood of any relationship. It's the thread that connects us, the tool we use to bridge gaps, to share our thoughts, feelings, and needs with one another. Yet, in the midst of love and closeness, communication is often the first casualty when confusion, distance, or silence creeps in. We've all experienced those moments where we misinterpret someone's actions or words, especially when they seem to pull away or appear distant. Without communication, these moments fester into misunderstandings that, if left unchecked, can cause emotional rifts, doubts, and even resentment. The truth is, human emotions are complex, and we can never fully know the intricacies of someone else's inner world without listening. When someone who loves you deeply seems to ignore you or withdraw, it's easy to jump to conclusions, to assume they don't care, or worse, that they no longer love you. But those assumptions are often based on limited information and emotions in the moment. Without the courage to ask, to open up the channels of communication, we stay trapped in our own perspectives, missing out on the opportunity to truly understand one another. Effective communication isn't just about talking. It's about listening actively and empathetically. Too often we think of communication as a one-way street, where we express our feelings or frustrations, expecting the other person to understand and respond accordingly. But communication is far more powerful when it becomes a two-way exchange. We need to allow space for the other person to share their feelings, their struggles, and their perspectives without jumping to conclusions or interrupting. True listening is an art. It's about hearing beyond the words, understanding the emotions behind them, and being open to seeing the situation through the other person's eyes. When we communicate openly, we begin to dissolve the fears that lead to misunderstanding. We learn to speak our truths not with anger or blame, but with vulnerability. Vulnerability is the foundation of connection. When we can admit our feelings, our insecurities, or our frustrations without fear of rejection, we create a safe space for the other person to do the same. This shared vulnerability builds trust, and trust is the antidote to the distance that often arises in relationships. Consider the moments when someone withdraws from you, creating space that feels like rejection. It's easy to assume the worst, to feel abandoned, and to retreat in response. But when we communicate openly and ask, "What's going on?" Or "Is there something I'm missing?" we invite understanding rather than assuming blame. We give the other person the opportunity to explain their emotional world, and we show them that we care enough to seek clarity rather than remain in the darkness of misunderstanding. One of the greatest obstacles to communication is fear of being judged, misunderstood, or rejected. We often withhold our true feelings because we're afraid of how they'll be received. But this silence only perpetuates the very thing we fear most: distance. Because communication isn't always easy, especially when emotions are raw or when misunderstandings have already taken root. But it is essential to move past those fears, to take that first step in reaching out, and to create space for honest dialogue. The antidote to misunderstanding lies in this simple act: talking openly, listening deeply, and embracing the vulnerability that allows us to truly connect with each other. Misunderstandings are inevitable in any relationship. No one is perfect, and no one can predict every reaction, every emotion. But with communication, we have the power to turn those moments of confusion into opportunities for growth. We have the chance to understand not just the other person's actions, but the emotions behind them. And when we understand each other's experiences, we strengthen the bond of love and connection, no matter the challenges that arise. As we learn to communicate with kindness, empathy, and vulnerability, we pave the way for healthier, more resilient relationships. Communication doesn't just resolve misunderstandings, it deepens the connection, allowing us to love more fully, more deeply, and more authentically. So next time you feel confused or disconnected, instead of retreating into your assumptions, reach out. Ask the questions that need to be asked. Listen with an open heart. And remember, communication is not just a tool for fixing problems, it's a bridge that connects hearts, builds trust, and nurtures the love we so deeply crave. In our fast-paced world. It's easy to fall into the habit of judging others, whether it's their actions, their words, or their choices. Judgment comes naturally to us because it's how we make sense of the world, how we try to navigate the complexities of human behavior. We observe the world around us and form opinions, often without fully understanding the deeper reasons behind someone's actions. But here's the thing, judgment, while instinctive, is not always productive or healthy. In fact, judgment often creates walls between us and the people we love, and it can prevent us from connecting in meaningful ways. Empathy, on the other hand, is the antidote to judgment. It is the ability to step into someone else's shoes, to understand their emotions, their struggles, and their unique perspective without immediately placing a label or passing a verdict. Empathy requires us to pause, to listen, and to acknowledge that everyone's experiences, fears, and reactions are shaped by things we may not see or understand at first glance. When someone who loves you deeply seems to withdraw or appears to be distant, it's easy to jump to conclusions. We might think they're rejecting us or don't care as much as we do. Our first instinct might be to criticize their behavior, to feel hurt or angry, and to interpret their actions through the lens of our own emotions and fears. But when we choose judgment, we close off the possibility of understanding. We create a narrative that isolates us and reinforces the idea that the other person is wrong, distant, or emotionally unavailable. And in doing so, we miss the chance to connect at a deeper level. Empathy, on the other hand, invites us to look beyond the surface. It challenges us to ask ourselves, what might they be going through? What might they be feeling right now? What are the circumstances or fears that are influencing their actions? When we approach someone with empathy, we open up a space for genuine connection. We acknowledge that their behavior isn't necessarily a reflection of how they feel about us. It's a reflection of what they are navigating within themselves. Instead of interpreting their distance as a rejection, we can approach it as a signal that they may need space, support, or simply time to process their own emotions. Empathy allows us to see the humanity in others, even when their actions confuse or frustrate us. We all have our own insecurities, wounds, and fears. These things shape how we interact with the world and the people we love. When we choose empathy, we acknowledge that everyone is doing the best they can with the tools they have in the moment. We also recognize that we don't always know what's going on beneath the surface. Perhaps the person who seems distant is dealing with stress, personal struggles, or unresolved pain. Maybe they're afraid of being vulnerable or afraid of hurting you. When we choose empathy, we give them the benefit of the doubt, and we create a space where they feel safe to open up and express their true feelings. Choosing empathy also means reframing our expectations of others. We live in a world that encourages us to measure love and affection through visible actions, through constant communication, attention, and closeness. But love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Sometimes love is quiet, sometimes it's silent, sometimes it's in the unspoken understanding that even in distance, the love is still there. When we approach others with empathy, we let go of our rigid definitions of what love should look like and allow room for different expressions of affection. We stop expecting perfection and start embracing the imperfect, messy ways people show they care. Judgment often arises from our own fears and insecurities. When we feel abandoned, rejected, or uncertain, we may resort to judgment as a way of protecting ourselves. We try to make sense of the situation by labeling the other person's actions or feelings as wrong or insufficient. But this response rarely leads to healing. Instead, it deepens our own hurt, reinforces our sense of separation, and prevents the kind of communication that could bring us closer. Empathy, on the other hand, invites vulnerability. It asks us to put our own feelings of hurt or fear aside, if only for a moment, and to focus on understanding the other person's emotions. It challenges us to be open, to listen deeply, and to suspend judgment while we take the time to truly understand what the other person is going through. Empathy is an act of compassion. It's about seeing someone as more than their behavior or their mistakes and recognizing them as a whole person with a unique story and a set of experiences that have shaped their current actions. When we choose empathy, we also choose healing. Empathy has the power to dissolve the walls that judgment builds. It nurtures connection, fosters understanding, and creates space for love to grow, even in difficult circumstances. It reminds us that we don't need to be perfect to be loved, and that we don't need to have all the answers to be supportive. What we need is the willingness to meet each other where we are, to listen with an open heart, and to approach each other with the understanding that everyone is on their own journey. So the next time you feel the pull of judgment, remember empathy has the power to transform. It can take a moment of confusion, frustration, or hurt and turn it into an opportunity for connection. When we choose empathy over judgment, we choose to see the best in others, to approach them with compassion, and to foster a deeper, more meaningful love. Because in the end, it's through empathy that we truly see each other not as flawed beings to be fixed, but as imperfect souls who are deserving of understanding, compassion, and unconditional love. As we conclude, let's remember this love is never about perfection. And relationships are never without their challenges. But it's in choosing empathy over judgment that we transform the way we connect with one another. When we choose to listen instead of criticize, to understand instead of assume, we create a space where healing, growth, and deeper connection can take root. Empathy allows us to see beyond the surface, to understand the fears, insecurities, and emotions that shape each person's actions. In the end, it's our capacity to choose empathy again and again that builds the foundation for lasting, meaningful relationships. So let's choose empathy over judgment today and every day. Let's remember that love isn't about always being close. It's about understanding each other, even when we're apart. And when we embrace empathy, we create the kind of connection that can weather any storm and grow stronger through the complexities of life. Thank you.